Welcome to the webinar. This is our fourth Litmaps webinar. We use these just as a way to share the tool with everyone and try to help you get the most out of Litmaps and to optimize your literature reviews. And also Litmaps can be used for many different aspects of research. We focus on literature review, but you can find what other use cases that may also be really helpful for you. So perhaps to help give you some context, the first thing I can do is just spend 2 minutes on what is Litmaps. So for those of you that are completely new here, or you just heard about the tool and you wanted to hop on and learn more. So Litmaps is a literature discovery tool. It's a website and an online application. It's a freemium tool, which means about 75, 80% of the features are free. And then there's a small portion of features that are paid. So you can go onto a premium plan if you want to have more access. And then we also have institutional licenses and teams and kind of more things. But in general, the vast majority of people using Litmaps are hopping on there and finding literature to support them in their research. It's mostly going to be undergraduate students, graduate students, professors, academics, as well as like researchers in industry. So there's a huge array of people here, as well as instructors using Litmaps in the classroom. So there's many different uses, but the core thing is if you're trying to find literature, see how papers connect through the citation network, trying to find research gaps, staying organized, all these different things are important in the literature review process, and that's what we really focus on with the Litmaps app. And the name Litmaps, if it's not been yet fleshed out clearly yet, Litmaps, right? Literature maps. So that's kind of the core offering of the application, is that it's not just taking a paper and looking at its citations, and it's not just giving you paper recommendations. It's kind of combining those into these more elevated literature maps where you can see how many different papers are connected and then also get recommendations and do this all visually. So that's kind of the main thing that makes Litmaps a little bit different than other tools, is that we want to get the most use out of using our visual mind. So we can understand visual information much faster usually than just looking at lists of information. And that's kind of, the core benefit of trying to use Litmaps to find papers or to stay organized or understand a scientific field. Here I am on the app home screen. So if you are totally new to Litmaps, I recommend that when you start using the app that you sign up for a free account. The free anonymous version is much more limited, so you're definitely going to want a Litmaps account in order to access the majority of our features. So getting started, that's our home page, and you can click either this create your first Litmap or on the top left here, either of these buttons. I'm going to just go ahead and click quick search and get started by finding a paper on my topic and creating a map. So in this example, like I said, I'm pretending I'm kind of really new to a topic, so I can type in keywords on it. But our general recommendation is we come in here with a really good paper or a good idea of a good starting point. Because what Litmaps does is it looks through the citation network to find recommendations. So what that means is that for every paper, it has references, right? Those are the papers that this paper cites and uses. And the paper also has future citations. So those are articles that are published later in the future that come back and cite our article. And so all these references and citations we refer to as the connections of this paper. Now, when you're looking for relevant literature on your topic, so say in this example, I'm doing just something about perhaps how conservation can be, how can we learn more about conservation and ecology from like a spiritual perspective using religions? This is just a random topic I picked for today. So this is about conservation and Buddhism. So I type in these keywords into Google Scholar and find these papers. And for example, this paper here, this is about creating the role of Buddhism in creating a more sustainable society in Thailand. Let's not get hung up on the subjects here. It's more about the examples, but it has cited by 28. So this means that 28 other articles have since come out that cite this article. And so that's the citation count for this paper. But this paper also has a certain number of references, right? Those are the number of papers that it uses within itself. And yes, I often use the word paper just for shorthand, but in general, we mean article. So this is something of a habit for me. But in general, when I say paper, you can imagine article. So scientific papers, right? That's like peer-reviewed published papers. but the Litmaps database has 270 million plus articles. So that can be things like this: book chapters, peer-reviewed articles, can even be some preprints. Largely, I will say it is peer-reviewed published articles or published papers, but articles can be a variety of things. So it's worth noting that, yeah, this is why, for example, this is a book chapter. But anyways, I just wanted to show you that here, for example, we are looking at this paper. It has a certain number of citations. And because it has a good number of citations, we know that its local citation network, so to speak, its area of connections, it has quite a few papers there, right? It has 28 papers that in the future have cited it. And although I didn't look at its references in particular, we know that no doubt it references many other published works. And so this is useful because the way the Litmaps algorithm works is it looks at this paper and all of its connections, and it does this for 2 degrees out. So then it takes every one of those connections and looks at all of its connections. And for this entire citation network, this localized citation network, we find the most interconnected papers. So this is why it's a little bit different than just a citation graph or just a reference graph. It's finding interconnected literature on the topic. Now, I might revisit that to make it extra clear, but hopefully this is giving you the beginning idea of what we're doing, that we are taking the paper. So say this is a good paper on my topic, good amount of citations, seems relevant. I type it into the Litmaps quick search. So I know some people just joined. I'll start at the beginning of the app. So this is the one place we've gone so far in the app, very first page of the app. Click on quick search at the top left, drop in the name of the paper I'm interested in, and I will find it right here. Yeah, we'll dive into this at the end of the webinar, but noticing that the references and citations here are a little bit different. We will go over this in a bit. This has to do with version counts or the versioning of different articles at different times. So if you have a question about that, definitely leave it in the chat and we'll go over it. But in general, this paper is here. We'll go ahead and click Explore Related Articles. And now what Litmaps is doing is it's looking for all the known citations and references that we have, right? It's looking at all of this localized network and the interconnectedness of it and finding which articles are the most interconnected. So which ones are citing and referencing each other the most in order to find the most relevant literature. And I'm just checking, a few more questions have popped up while I wait for the app. I don't know, it's a bit slow, I can refresh. So it says, is it searching Google Scholar, Web of Science, what indexes? Great question. I'll send out a link at the end of, yes, so next week when we send the recording, we'll send resources. But what Litmaps uses is actually 3 main databases. It uses all open source metadata from OpenAlex, Semantic Scholar, and Crossref. So it is mainly Semantic Scholar. Semantic Scholar itself has like some 240 million plus articles. I can't remember the exact count. It's a lot. Maybe it's a bit less than that, but it's a significant portion of our database, and we have an article outlining exactly where the data comes from. But in general, it's open access metadata. So you can find both papers that are open access and papers that are not open access, because it's the metadata that we have access to. So I'll just rerun this. I think I am, yeah, I don't know, there's something strange just with my internet. So here I have searched for the paper, pulled it up, and I'm creating my first litmap for this topic. So this is kind of the core Litmaps offering and the main thing, right? This is our litmap. So on the right-hand side here, this visual, the dark node, that represents my input paper. So you can see that's the same paper, this author, the year. And all these kind of hollow dots represent the paper suggestions or article recommendations based on this article's citation network and all these interrelated papers that connect to it. And so in this particular example, this paper is a 1995 paper. It's a little bit older. And what happens is we end up getting a lot of suggestions that are all newer. Now, the litmap doesn't always look like this. It's never the same, right? In general, depending on the age of the paper, you see a distribution of references and citations and papers that are not actually directly connected at all, but are connected through second-degree citations. So this is just to give you an idea that here's my starting paper, the one I inputted. Each of these is a recommendation, and the lines show how they connect. To admit. So for example, this paper, when I highlight it, is connected to both my starting paper and another paper on the map, which means it's actually citing both of those. The same papers that are on our map are also on the left-hand side of the screen. So I can scroll up and down here, and when I highlight over one, it highlights on the map. And I also want to mention this legend here. So at the bottom left of the map is a legend showing you what the x-axis and y-axis are sorted by. So by default, the map's x-axis is sorted by date of publication, and the y-axis is by citation count. So that's why I could say visually, like off the bat, oh, look, these are all citations, because I can see that they're all to the right of my paper. And using the y-axis, I can say, if I look to the very top paper, this is going to be the most cited one on my visualization right now. Now, this is basically what I mentioned earlier about trying to take advantage of the fact that we are pretty visual in nature. So we can quickly spot things on a map that we would have a hard time doing in a list. So scrolling through this list, it's maybe not entirely obvious which one would be, say, the most highly cited and oldest. But if I just highlight over here, then I can see, look, this is the farthest left and the farthest top. So as far as all these articles that are suggested go, this is the most this is the oldest and the most highly cited on my map. And inversely, if I was more interested in finding literature that is, say, much more recent, then I go to the farther right of my plot, so where as the date axis increases, and find, hey, this is a 2014 paper, this is a 2018 paper. And naturally, most litmaps tend to do this, which is a bit of a diagonal situation, that's it's going top left to bottom right, because naturally the older a paper is, it tends to be more highly cited because it's had more time to acquire those citations, and newer papers tend to have less. So returning to our kind of generic flow of a literature review, at this point, I did kind of skip the very initial steps of how you select your topic and all these different things, but I just wanted to show you this in the context of the application and of literature discovery. So if you joined a little later, I'm sorry about that. I hope you're not being thrown in too quick, but imagine at this point, we have our topic. We found a starting paper on our topic. So this paper I passed in. And then now I'm looking at paper suggestions. So I'm still doing literature review. I'm curious. I'm learning about my topic. And what I would do in this context is either scroll through this list or click on these papers. And as we do, you might want to begin, perhaps you have read some, then you might want to start tagging them and saving and staying organized. So to do that, you can click tag for any paper. And tagging, you can use these in whatever way makes sense for you. So if I was just starting on this project, just starting to understand these topics, I would note, okay, look, this is actually about Buddhism in Thailand, so perhaps I want to use the Thailand tag. Maybe that will end up being important for me, is what regions I'm looking at specifically. Maybe not. This is, I think, not a useful idea here, but in general, the tags are just going to be whatever makes sense to you. So how can you divide your research into useful subtopics? And we can do this for whatever papers you're reading or taking notes on. And additionally, the other thing that is very helpful is we can create as many of these maps as we'd like for specific papers. So for example, let's find something that's also on our topic here. So here's understanding culture in territorial management. And what I can do is just for this paper alone, I can click on it on the map. And if I find, hey, this paper is really related to my topic also, I can click on these dots on the top right and explore it on a new litmap. And this is just a useful technique if you want to be creating litmaps and essentially entering the subject from different angles. So yeah, so if you're starting research on a new topic, for the senior researchers, it's no doubt familiar, but for the more, the people learning literature review the first time, starting your first research projects, you might have an initial paper that you're starting with, but a topic is very, very big. There's many places to kind of approach that topic. So you can do this idea of creating a litmap with a single starting article You can do that many times. And in this way, you're kind of entering the field from many different angles and seeing it from many different perspectives, rather than immediately starting to curate a very specific list. So it's kind of a breadth versus depth approach. This is breadth, is if I keep going through these maps and keep papers, and then you know, tagging, keeping track, and when I find a relevant paper, clicking on explore on a new Litmap and creating this kind of breadth first approach. Okay, so that is how we first find an initial paper in Litmaps, create a map for it, tag things with whatever subcategories make sense, and then create additional Litmaps for papers as we explore and create this kind of wider breadth first search approach. The next thing I wanted to go over is going deeper into a specific topic. So if I have a specific paper, how can I now hone in on my topic and start to save papers on that topic? So in this example, I have saved one paper to this tag, but imagine I want to start, you know, really diving deeper and curating these lists and getting a really specific set of recommendations. So the best way to do this is to actually help grow your Litmap and use the exploration function to find more literature. So going back to my original one here, I'll just click explore related. So that was just going to the tag, seeing what I have here, and just clicking explore at the top. So I'm just back on my original page. And from here, one option I can have is to say, click on a paper. And if I think, hey, this is relevant, I can tag it like before. But what I can also do is click the more like this button. So this is just helping us to add papers to our map. And in this way, I can click update results and it will rerun the algorithm now with multiple starting papers. And this is where we're approaching what is kind of catering towards a more like substantial research project. So if you have, say, dozens or hundreds of papers, if you're a more senior researcher, this is the really useful use case of Litmaps as well, is that you can run those algorithms on as many papers as you'd like. So if you have a huge collection and you want to find any other missing links, that's a great use case as well. So, because as you can imagine, if I go through here and you click more like this continuously and doing this for a long time, then you're going to acquire quite a few papers. And whenever you're ready, you can click update results. And it will rerun the algorithm with those papers used as inputs. So you can imagine you can do this continuously, growing your map, finding and honing in on your specific topic. Additionally, you can also get even more focused by using keywords. So this has plenty of use cases that are likely very intuitive, but perhaps, for example, you are searching on a specific topic, and then you want to find, hey, is this methodology ever used in this field or something like that? Then that would be a great time to put it in as a keyword. And this way, from amongst all of your paper's connections, you can find if there's any articles on these subjects. So yeah, keywords function simply by, we use the same existing top connected algorithm or this top shared citations and references, and we simply limit the results to those that are using keywords in the title or abstract. The other thing to note here is we can change the algorithm itself. So this is something that's, you can say is a slightly more advanced feature. It's kind of a bit optional, but if you are focused on finding different papers using different search techniques, then this is a great place to look. So by default, again, we use the top shared citations and references. So that's, to explain this one more time in case I muddled it up the first time, we're taking this paper, we're taking all of its connections, and we're taking all of those papers' connections. And this creates a huge localized citation network from which we find the most top interconnected papers. And if you have more than one input paper, we treat all of those input papers like the same way. So it can be very big networks, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of papers or articles. And that's why the results can be really excellent, because it's looking at a big set, but it's looking at how they all relate to one another. And that's why you get very useful recommendations, and they're highly related to the citations and references, but you can also find things that are not directly connected. However, you might be interested in going kind of past connection. Maybe you're interested in finding things that maybe people missed. And so in this case, you can actually just use AI semantic similarity. So this bottom algorithm here, similar abstract and title content, it's exactly what it sounds like. Instead of searching based on connection, it will now search based on how similar the titles and abstracts are using an AI-driven algorithm on semantic similarity. The other algorithm option here is common authorship patterns. So this is looking again at all of those connected papers, but based on their authorship patterns. So it's not just if this one author wrote both of these papers, but it's if this collection of authors tends to collaborate on your existing papers, then what other papers have they written? So it's kind of not just authorship, it's co-authorship. It's just what most prevalent collaborations exist in your literature. That can be more useful if you're trying to understand a field and understand what, say, impactful research labs are working in that field. Then you can try the common authorship patterns algorithm. So the algorithms you can change on the free version, but this date and keyword filter, these are only on Pro. And so I also wanted to just display for you what it looks like when you've made some more progress on your review. So I have obviously, I spent a lot of time on Litmaps, so I have quite a few maps and collections and tags and all these things. And so the idea is once you have, curated quite a few papers, you start organizing on different topics. That's the other utility of Litmaps is we can say, not only do I see what papers I have, I can kind of mark them by color and see how they interact and kind of stay organized with these different topics. So to get here, I just was at my homepage Litmaps, and then I just click on one of my maps. So in the app, you just see all of your maps on the home screen. I click on one, and from here I have a few options. And so previously in the webinar so far, we've just been in this world of explore related articles. That's how we just take our input articles, the ones we already know, the ones that are saved to our map, and we find recommendations. That's what we've covered. If I click back here, there's two other options on the screen. So one is called design. If I open design, we get into this view. Now it didn't automatically do this. I did this myself. So earlier I had moved around these nodes and organized them and clustered them based on their topic here that I have created tags for. And this is basically a secondary view that Litmaps has just so you can interact more with your visualization in the literature review process. So you have your article, you have slowly curated this collection, you've stayed organized with different subcategories. Whether or not you've done this in Litmaps, by the way, is totally fine. But say we've done this in Litmaps, we have these different categories, we have this map with all of our articles. As you're farther and farther along in the process, you're still not really done, right? Because in a sense, next week, a new paper can come out and it can be really important and you want to know about it. So that's the main goal of this final option here. It's called monitor. So your default view here, you see monitor this Litmap to automatically scan for newly published articles. You just hit enable monitor and that's literally all you have to do. So now Litmaps will send you a new email every week only if new papers come out. So it's a very low effort way to stay informed. And the side note, this is also a Pro-only feature. There are several different ways to export. If you are working in this map-based context, then you want to export the papers on your map. Just click Articles at the top right. That shows you all the articles on this map. And you just click this download button. You can export as a bib, CSV, RIS. Similarly, if you want to export from a tag, it's the same thing. So just click on a tag and click this download button at the top right. You might also find papers as you're going. So if you find a paper that you want to cite, you can just click on the paper on the map, these top three dots, the dots at the top right, click on them, and you can also export kind of individual references like this. Additionally, this is how we export papers. You might also want to share. So sharing means you're not just exporting to make a bib tag to put it in a paper, but perhaps you actually want to share this map itself. So whether you want to share it as a link or an email or an embedding in a page, we just click Open Design and we click Share. And that's all. So there's a few different options here. This link that is given, this is a publicly accessible URL. So for example, I drop in the URL, you should all be able to access it and yeah, copy this map locally to your own account and play around with it. Well, the link though is not a collaborative link. So collaborating requires a different setup. It requires a team account and all that stuff. But if you just want to share a publicly accessible map, that's how you do it. It's one of the easiest ways. Otherwise, by email, or you don't share your map. Of course, if you want to take a screenshot, you can do this too. You just click on the bottom right. Those are kind of the core ways that you get articles out, or you get the map itself out. There's a question from Said about, if I had an article already, do I just drop it and get it loaded, or do I need to load only EndNote? So I'll just go over general article importing just so we have a broader idea here, because I'm not sure exactly what this means, but if we click on quick search or on create litmap, those are the two ways to get started. You can go to the top here and click upload file. So for most of your reference manager questions, if you have papers in Zotero and EndNote, Mendeley, any software where you're keeping track of your references, you can export those out as a bibtexт or whatever file format and import them into here. So you can drag and drop in here. You can actually even drag and drop directly onto maps. And so yeah, that's the easiest way to bring in your papers. Additionally, you can search manually by starting a new map, or if I'm already on a map, in this map I'll go back to explore mode, I can always add articles directly to it. So by clicking search here, or by uploading a file. Someone asks, Benny asks, what's the meaning of my top paper? Is that one with more citations? Did I pick it randomly? So by top paper, if this is what we mean, maybe is when I was talking about the starting paper. So if this is about the starting paper, then in the context of the literature review process, so this is just the flow I often go to and will use in examples, but if I'm new to a topic, then what I tend to do is say, okay, we have to start somewhere, right? You can't start nowhere, we have to start somewhere. So we need to have a good starting paper. So what paper do I read first? Now in real life, obviously advisors give their students papers, and yeah, there's more collaborative energy going on. But if you are starting a new research project and you're actually starting this alone, then you need to identify that paper yourself. And that's what I mean by this initial process that we were doing that perhaps I rushed through a bit, but by going to a reliable resource. So there's many large-scale databases, something like PubMed, maybe Google Scholar, typing in those keywords and finding the paper that seems best to match our topic. Now, depending on your topic, this might be really easy, it might be really hard. But my goal here isn't to find the perfect paper or anything. It's just to find some great relevant starting points. And the reason I spent some time talking about citation count is just because the more highly cited a paper is, it tends to be high impact, it tends to be important in that field. And so we want to know about it, and it's a great place to start. And as well as the fact that the default Litmaps algorithm, it's using citations. So if you have a paper with 0 citations, that's not going to be, we can't take advantage of the algorithm as well because it's working off the number of citations and references. So that's what I just mean about starting paper, just where we begin our search. So here we have a question from Dr. Raja Sankaran. So this is a great question about our database again, like where do we get our articles from? Does it include non-good or non-category journals and so on? That's a great question. We actually really have been meaning a long time to add journal filters, and yeah, like this is really useful information. There's some ways to focus on certain journals. However, right now, we don't use this information in any way that wouldn't be encoded in the citation network. So for example, the citation network itself, or why a paper is cited because it's, it hopefully was impactful. And of course, there's problems with citation count. There's some issues there, but in general, this is the rule of thumb we go by. And so this, in a sense, should address to some degree the journal concern of like just somehow very low ranking journals and things like that. But in another way, we're not expressly accounting for it or doing anything. So in general, we're just relying on a citation network, finding relevant articles. And you can again use the semantic similarity search. So if you want to avoid this even a bias of connections and how things are related to one another through citations, then use the AI semantic similarity. This is completely, say, apathetic to that information. So in a sense, it can be advantageous. You can find things you maybe otherwise wouldn't notice. But in another sense, yes, you'll get hopefully a diverse set of results that maybe will be a huge diverse set of journals. It's hard to tell, but it's also based on citation count. So this is all kind of connected. Hopefully that clears it up. Rabea asks, on search, there isn't any article on top with the same prompt. So is it reliable? Perhaps you mean when I am in this page, and this is something I can share with you as well. So I go to quick search, I'm looking for a paper, say it's, yeah, this random paper. It can certainly happen that I look for a paper and it may not come up here if this is what the question's about. Now in this case, again, I can share information about our database, but there's a variety of reasons for that. So we have a very, very large corpus of data, and it's again from a variety of sources, but still, it can be that this paper itself, we wouldn't expect to have it because it doesn't fit, our requirements, so to speak. It doesn't have open source metadata or something like that. Or it can also be a versioning issue. So the recommendation is if you cannot find this paper, the first thing to please always do is to go to that paper link and just search by DOI. So if I take the DOI and search for that, this 9 times out of 10 will fix that problem. You'll find the paper. If you still can't find the paper, then it might be a versioning issue. So we might have that paper under a different ID or something. That's much rarer, but it can happen. And lastly, we might not have an article index. So that can happen too. If that happens, we often ask that you actually can report it. So you can always email support@litmaps.com. But I think you'll be surprised by the extent of the database. So usually if it's any peer-reviewed article, somewhat recent, last 10, 20 years, likely you really should be able, we should be able to have it. And depending on the domains too, of course, there's a certain distribution of what domains are covered. But yeah, our goal is to have as big of a corpus that's as useful as possible. So definitely report missing stuff if you have the time and energy to do so. That's useful for us. And lastly, the other thing I want to check on, because this is a common question, and this is that this number references and citations might be different than what you see in a different source, right? So here it's 9425, here it's 39. Now this happens because of the complexities involved with how we get data into Litmaps, and it is a bit of a long story, but suffice to say that those reasons that I said why we don't have an article in this database, that's similar why this reference count is different, because those references also can have the same problem, or those citations can have the same problem. They also might not be indexed by us. They might not have open source metadata. And so therefore we just don't have access to them. Now you're still going to thankfully see a pretty big number here. So that 25 out of 39, at least we're getting a pretty good amount of coverage. And hopefully those are the most impactful and relevant articles anyways. But yes, to have a total and complete count, you're going to, of course, for most literature review, most searching in general, we want to use multiple databases and multiple sources. And obviously that's where things like someone asked earlier about systematic reviews. This is one of those things where that's why we need to use multiple sources. Benny also asked, are you able to select only peer-reviewed articles? So right now there's no filter for different kinds of articles. So again, that comes down to selecting papers based on citation count, reference count. The little trick I'll show you though is when I'm on these maps, I kind of briefly alluded to the legend at the bottom left, but this legend can also be altered. So it's a little bit easier to see in the standard view here. But the x-axis I said is date, y-axis is citation count. So say, this is not specific to peer-reviewed articles, but different article types, you can use different variables to find them. So say you're looking for a really big chunky review paper. Maybe I can sort by citation count, and then my node size is actually already set to the reference count. So if I look around here and look at what's the highest cited and also largest node, it's this one. Perhaps this is a review paper. It's unclear. It doesn't say review in the title here, but these are clearly very comprehensive works. So yeah, I don't know if this hack helped this time. Here's a survey of relevant literature. So this is kind of review-like, but in general, the idea here is you can use these variables to hone in on general, maybe not very specific article types, right? It's not a filter that we have that's like, this is a review paper, this is definitely a methods, this is definitely a theory. But in general, we can use these to hone in on, say, something that's more cited and has a lot of references, or perhaps something that is highly interconnected to our map. So I changed the x-axis to map relevance. And so this is the paper that is the most interconnected on the map. This paper is highly connected to all my other papers. And this paper at the top right, this historic paper, because it's 1967 or it's historic article, it's also highly connected. And so if we're looking for articles that, you know, perhaps summarize our work well, this could be map relevance. And the last thing I'll just touch on, because it's a useful one, is momentum. So momentum is the citation count adjusted for time. As we mentioned a long time ago, now 45 minutes ago, at the top left, we tended to get articles that were older and highly cited. And at the bottom right of the map, we tend to get things that are newer and less cited. Momentum tries to address the fact that older papers always have more citations. So we use this little time adjustment slider, and the more to the right that you slide it, it will kind of outweigh the citation count by date. So this paper, for example, it's a 2023. It has only one citation, but given that it's a 2023 article, that's actually quite a lot, right? Relatively speaking. This is the idea behind momentum. Same with this 2023 paper, it has 2 citations. But if we just sorted it by typical, you know, citation and date, they'll get completely lost in the mix. We can't distinguish them because they're just new papers to us. So that's a great way of distinguishing what's new, but what's new and seems to have an outsized impact given its newness. How is Litmaps different from ConnectedPapers or Web of Science or VOSviewer from Jonathan Peterson? So thanks, this is a great question. So the main thing is Web of Science and VOSviewer. From my understanding of VOSviewer, this requires some, like for example, you might say you search for your papers on Web of Science, you can see these visualizations and their breakdowns and things like that. That I would say, I guess, is more, I guess I can't speak to this much because I haven't used it. So I'm not sure, other than probably similar to our difference from ConnectedPapers, which is like kind of the combination of things we do and how we do them. So whereas on these other pages, you might be viewing, say with, I'm imagining with VOSviewer, you can correct me, but you kind of already have your articles and now you're seeing visualizations about them, these little bubbles with keywords and breakdowns and stuff. But that's more looking at what you have. So if I'm not wrong, what the difference here is that we also have this explore feature. So instead of just focusing on what we have and creating visualizations, which is useful, we also want to see, like, what are the recommendations? How do I grow this network using connections or using also different algorithms, and also at the same time giving myself my own visual labels and managing that. So I think that's the main distinction, is like kind of how we both specialize in exploring and searching, as well as in the visual stuff. And that's the same distinction with ConnectedPapers, which is also a great app, but it's just different in the way that we are focused on curating these maps and helping explore with maps. So the more like this button, and yeah, and maintaining lots of different tags, and kind of this kind of specialization that we are both searching and reviewing. So we're not just stuck in one or the other. But yeah, but every app and tool obviously has their reasons. So if you should use whatever makes sense for your specific project and situation. Okay, and this was a kind of a general question. Someone, Claudia Neuschultz, would like to know, how do I integrate the analysis into my Zotero, into my EndNote, etc.? So to answer this, I think it's going to be the same as answering the question about exporting. So to export articles out of Litmaps, import into those tools. But the other fun thing I'll show you is actually for Zotero in particular, there's something called the Zotero connector, which if you don't have it yet, I highly recommend. It makes it super easy. You will only need it for a very short amount of time because pretty soon we're going to have a Zotero integration, which will make it even easier. But in the meantime, if you go to the Google Chrome Zotero connector, you go to the Google Chrome store and you find this Zotero connector. It's just like a free Google Chrome extension. If you're not using Google Chrome, then you can tune me out for like 2 minutes. But if you do, then you can get this extension. And this way, when you're on a page, like say I go to my list of articles here. So here's an example folder that I can use. And here is the app, the Litmaps app. And so I already have this Zotero connector set up. I just click on the folder icon at the top right. It automatically saves to whatever folder is open in Zotero, and it'll look through all the papers on the page and import them into that folder. So this is something that Litmaps did not do. Like, this is operating by Zotero. They created it. but it's a really useful tool. So sometimes it just, for example, in this moment, I think it's just taking like a minute or two just to read through all these, because this is a set of like about 30 plus articles. I think it's just a little bit more involved. So there we go. We have all the articles, click select all and click OK. And if I go here, sometimes you can see it in real time updating, but here you go. These are all the same papers that have now been auto added. So that's like one of the easiest ways to interact with, with Zotero and Litmaps together if you are using both of those tools. Is there an option for, this is by Fayaz Ahmad, any option for summary of articles and any option for systematic review and meta-analysis? So right now there is no way to summarize articles in Litmaps. I would say you can, there's definitely, I think, other tools and like ChatGPT like tools. Making your own GPT would be awesome for that, I think. But yeah, right now in the app, we don't have anything like that. Someone asks, Benny asks about the size of the bubble circle is the number of citations. So by default, I think it's your reference count. It might be citation count. So just check the legend at the bottom left. And yeah, you can change it to be anything you want. So yeah, the idea of changing the node size or the axes on maps is just that you can visually see things faster. So if you're looking for review papers, if you're looking for, you care about high impact, high citation, use those filters and use those axes to optimize for that. The last thing I wanted to touch on, which is pertaining more to anyone who's in a position where you don't just do research, but you perhaps are also in an advisor position or an instructor position, or you might essentially be assisting others with their research and wanting to teach literature review techniques and maybe use Litmaps with your students. So if any of that sounds like your situation, then I just want to point out also one more resource, which I will send by email. I'll just show it quick. This is the website, and I just, I'm on the home page, go to the top, look at the about, teach with Litmaps. This is what I really recommend. This is like a totally free resource. It's just basically a kind of a Litmaps class that we have where it's a bunch of lecture slides and a comprehensive document going through 3 kind of lessons on how would I do literature review with Litmaps. So it's a little bit like what we discussed today, but way more focused for instructors, and like hopefully these lecture slides could be useful if it's something you want to teach or use that in assistance to your teaching. And just to access it, we just pass in our emails here, and that's all we got to do. Then you can immediately get a link to the hosted course, which is, it's not a big fancy course. It's just this long document as well as course slides. So yeah, I just suggest checking that out if you're wanting to teach lit review and if you found Litmaps as a useful method for that. So we've had some instructors tell us that it's been useful for them, even with like undergrad classes where people are just starting out on research. So this is why we made this material. So if it is helpful, definitely let us know. I'm trying to make this course better and make it with more videos and like this more involved thing. So we definitely appreciate any feedback if you have for that. Okay, I guess this is all the questions we have so far. Thank you all so much for attending and for your really thoughtful questions, your kind comments, your thanks. It's been a total pleasure to share Litmaps with you. And as this really great suggestion by Fayaz, I definitely think we will try to keep up the community to maintain this open line of communication. So yeah, we're a very small team. There's just me and 2 other full-time people. So we're definitely always eager to hear how is Litmaps really being used and to share what our suggestions are. But yeah, your ideas, of course, are also really valuable for us. So yeah, so thank you all so much. I hope you have a great morning or evening wherever you are, and definitely watch out for the emails, and yeah, hopefully see you in the future. And good luck with all of your different research endeavors.